Merci, Karine. I learned a wonderful new phrase, gagnant-gagnant. There you are, the French system, win-win, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And now we're going to hear from another language, actually, too, which is, and another way of doing things. We're going to hear from Greece, and now we're going to hear from Bessie Dendrinos. And Bessie, as I said earlier, is from the University of Athens, the National and Capodistrian, I think it is, that's the right way to pronounce it, University of Athens. And she's at the Department of Language and Linguistics, Faculty of English Language and Literature. And Bessie, you're going to speak in English and in Greek, is that correct?
Not really in Greek. I think that I will just say Kalispera σε όλους σας. Do my greeting in Greek. Bonsoir. Which is the second language that I learned and do not use because I'm scared to death of making mistakes in my French. So I use it to read. My last reading of Michel Foucault was in French, but I do not use it. I use English because I'm confident in it, since I teach in English because I teach in an English department. Actually, I'm not going to be providing good practices from Greece or from other parts of the world that we have worked with. I was asked actually to provide an outsider's point of view in relation to England in particular. And so I do have a PowerPoint which I am going to try and use, but a lot of the things that are on my PowerPoint presentation have already been touched upon, and therefore I'm going to be going very quickly through some of these things. But I will say that it is the first time in Europe that we have measurable comparisons, and that is extremely important. The first facts come from the Eurobarometer, where you see some broad data from there. Those of you that have not seen them, there is a very broad consensus throughout Europe that language learning is good. Okay, and that includes England. However, and despite the opinions, language learning in Europe in general is not as good as we would like it to be. And England holds one of the last places, actually, and this data comes from SurveyLang. It's the European Survey of Language Competencies. It does come last, as you will see in this slide. And France is not far behind from being behind. I have just provided some data, and that is, we see Sweden being in the first place, and that is in regard to the first language. When we go to the second foreign language, Sweden comes to be one of the last countries. But I was wondering as I was putting this data down, and I was thinking, this is the first time ever that there was some measurable kind of data across Europe. And I was wondering, if we were doing this in one's mother tongue, or in mathematics, or in physics, wouldn't there be just as many differences across countries? PISA certainly shows that, and PISA results do not include all of the subject areas. So maybe it's not only language learning that should be at our in our broad spectrum, but also about education in general throughout Europe, and having some type of measures that we can compare. But that is a very difficult thing, because when we're talking about testing something, then we want to have measurable results, that has to be through some kind of objective type of testing. But communication is not objective. Language learning cannot be measured that way. I'm responsible in Greece for the national foreign languages examinations that lead to certification, proficiency exams. And we have 6 languages, but we're constantly studying and seeing the difference between performance and testing and actual performance. They're very, very different things. Okay, some more data comes from the findings of Language Rich Europe, and that was another project that gave us comparable data throughout Europe. In other words, we're just beginning, and I'm glad that it's beginning with languages. It would be interesting to have comparisons with other sorts of things. But again, from Language Rich Europe, we have comparable data in relation to language education and also about businesses and things that we've heard a lot about this morning. Actually, a colleague who is here, Goff Scaplehorn, who's British representative of the European Forum of Technical and Vocational Education, showed me his PowerPoint presentation recently and some data that he gave me compared to data that was presented to us this morning and from the Elan report in relation to businesses. I'd like to focus on an outsider's perspective on why. Why is this so, particularly in England, though I do not think that these things are particular to England per se. Number one, policy, and it's not just policy, but it's political engineering, that one thing is introduced and then the next government comes and changes it. Okay, and this is true in Greece, definitely. It's true in France, it's true in Italy, it's true in Portugal, it's true in so many situations. There are some exceptions in the Northern European countries where, regardless of government, there's some constant policy, not only in language learning, but in education. I remember the wonderful example in Sweden in the 1950s, when comprehensive education was introduced. It took 25 years to do that, and that was through research and constant policy that remained the same regardless of who was there. The same in Finland with their wondrous educational system. So part of the reason is the changing policy, not what the policy is, and we've heard some of that this morning. The second because, in my perspective, is that basically language learning starts at different ages, and I've heard recently in the Language Rich Europe report, it was that the decision was that it would start at age 9. Now there's a different decision for it to start at age 7, and we go on to this. Then there's the issue of how many hours languages are offered in school, and that's another issue. And who is teaching? The issue of generalist or specialist teachers is another important issue, and we have different sorts of practices in European countries. In France, we have the generalist teachers as well as in the UK. In other countries, we have specialist teachers, and there are different problems confronting different groups. The third because that I've jotted down is because language skills are viewed as an asset for employability, mobility, and growth. That is the flag issue of the European Union right now. Okay, now, if we see, and if that's the way we're going to convince people that languages are important for that alone, then we should rethink about which languages are being offered in school. because a lot of times the languages that are offered are not the languages that are in demand. There's an example here in relation to Chinese and how it is regarded throughout Europe. It's growing, but it's being offered in very few European schools, at least as part of the primary or secondary education. Issue number 4, post-colonial attitudes in Britain. There is a standing myth that the whole world speaks English, whereas 75% does not. The internet is slowly decreasing in becoming dominated by English. From 2000 to 2010, it dropped to 29%. And there's very strong social resistance still. There's a study that was done by a colleague, Janet Enever, in 2009, and her conclusions are that there is a lot of social resistance in the society, making children a lot of times react very negatively to languages. What they say, interviews that Janet had as part of the Ellie project were quite negative in terms of the children, which, of course, again, are not only unique to England, there are to other countries, but it depends what kind of attitude the whole country has towards languages. And that's why we cannot have universal answers, as Rosie said at the beginning, because language is so politically defined, so ideological, and languages are, so that it is very, very difficult to say, what are the good practices throughout? It's very difficult because there are different answers to different countries because languages are confronted differently in different countries. And of course, my reason number 4 is England's linguistic diversity that Baroness also Garden said earlier this morning. There's a population of 58.8 million people, of which 16% belong to an ethnic minority group or a mixed race. 1 in 6 of its school children have another language besides English. And London alone has 233 district languages, which means that England is truly a linguistic diverse society, as are other English-speaking countries such as the United States and Australia, and so on and so forth. So this brings us to a very political question. Which language, or put differently, whose language is it that we learn, use, abide by, and for what reason? And these are all politically and ideologically impregnated issues. And this is why within the UK, within England, there are questions about which are the languages that should have priority and should be offered. The languages which are community languages and where children can actually communicate with their peers in school. Is it languages that are the EU languages, and of the EU languages, which are those? Recently, for example, and I was talking about it with my Portuguese colleague, it was decided that the open education, the open resource platform be offered in 5 languages to begin with. And my colleague said, why not Portuguese? Portuguese is a very big language, and it is, okay? But which languages are decided upon is a very big issue, and it is a political issue. It doesn't have to do with data, which is, and of course, language does have to do with identity and citizenship. And recent research that we have been doing shows that multilingualism has a direct relationship to citizenship and the development of linguistic repertoires as an essential component of language education in a globalized world. And here is where I will totally agree with Bernadette because language learning is not merely an instrumental issue, and it does concern businesses, we saw that. It does concern other things, but it also concerns, very importantly, one's identity formation and construction, and it is a matter of citizenship. What sorts of citizens we need within the European Union. Basically, in the EU, the languages that are promoted are the European languages exactly and politically because of the idea of citizenship within the European nation. So what is next? I'm going to be very quickly in saying that the Common European Framework of Languages proposes a concept of plurilingualism that has not entered our educational systems yet. And I will conclude by saying that the whole idea is not to talk only about languages, but to rethink about language education in a general perspective, from a multilingualism perspective, so that people begin using what we have called the multi-languages approach and the language fusion approach. In other words, stop seeing language education and education in school as a monoglossic project. And this is what it is. And I'm using my Greek word now, it doesn't have to be translated. But what I'm saying is that still, and it's a very, very big discussion, still within our educational systems, we continue to function as one language projects and as one language subjects, when the whole world around us is becoming multilingual and multi-skilled. A multi-literacies whole educational project has to change, and if we don't, because we don't as educators change our mind, I think that by opening up through open language resources, kids will be doing it for us. I just hope that we'll be receptive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Bessie Dendrinos. Thank you so much. And now we have, in fact, this works so perfectly as well. We go on from multilingualism to multilingualism. We have with us Christine Parker, who's head teacher of a multilingual primary school in Peterborough. It's Gladstone Primary School, and Christine's going to talk to us about their projects and what we can learn from them.
Oh, there we go. That's good. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me here today. It feels a real privilege to be here and to, as an educator, to be in a forum with people from so many different professions, and I think that's very, very positive. I want to begin by just following up one of Baroness Garden's points with regard to the power of the media's influence, which, from our perspective in schools, does create a significant barrier to creating a society that celebrates and values multilingualism. So I quote from the Daily Mail yesterday: 5 schools where not one pupil has English as their first language, and there are another 240 that are not far behind. Well, I say great. It's confirmed we're language rich. So we have to turn this on its head, don't we? So I'm calling my very short talk, I Love My Life. I'm quoting Mehaimin Labib. Mehaimin Labib is in year 5. He is 9 years old, and I have to be very honest and frank with you, and I did ask his permission to share this with you. He didn't really like school very much when he started. So when he said this just the other week, when he was engaged in a very creative activity, I just felt, yes, we're getting somewhere. We're on a journey in our school, and we're at the it feels like we're still at the beginning of that journey, but as the head teacher, as a leader and an educator, that's what I need to hear the children saying. I want to hear children that are confident, they're enjoying their learning, and they have that confidence to express themselves in this way. So I want to present to you the context of our learning environment, our multilingual learning community, and I want to try and demonstrate how we see the power of multilingualism, because it's not only about the ability to be able to speak more than one language, it's also about developing an understanding of each other as human beings and showing that curiosity about different ways of life and different cultures. And I think for me, it also holds notions of social justice and moral purpose. So having an understanding and appreciation of multilingualism goes hand in hand with learning to get on with each other. And from our perspective, that's about the children, the staff, the families, and the local community, and beyond the local community. It's about acknowledging our similarities and differences. It's about recognizing conflict when it happens and seeking resolution. It's about understanding the need for open dialogue and honest debate, and embarking on a spirit and embracing a spirit of inquiry. And for us, this is what unlocking that power of multilingualism is all about. And we know, it is proven, that when children are articulate in more than one language, they do better in school. In our school, I haven't actually got the data to present to you, but I can tell you that our percentages are improving year on year, and I'm very proud. I'm just going to say something about our 7-year-olds. They finished the end of year 2 achieving at and above national expectations, and you know, that's what this is about. And that's been a real change for us over these last 5 years, about understanding that the multilingual child is just presents to us so much potential and so many opportunities. So I also want to just before I kind of show you what our school looks like, I just want you to be heartened by certain facts, and that is that in primary schools we are still teaching modern languages, and our children start to learn French from the age of 7, and actually if they show an interest in other languages prior to that, we do support their curiosity and their interests. I think it's really important. I think some people need to go and do some observations in the primary classroom and see just how effective English grammar is being taught in a dynamic way that enables all our children are bilingual, enables them to achieve at national expectations in English. So I think, you know, we really are getting something right. I also would like to say that I find it very, very difficult that we use certain terms to describe children, which I find present us with a deficit model of the child. So, for example, we talk about children acquiring English as an additional language, and within the world of education, we hear that diminished to the acronym EAL. Well, I certainly would never have wanted to be described as an EAL child as a child, and we've got to really stand up and move away from that type of language. So let's have a look at the place. Here we are. Here's Peterborough, home for 101 languages, has a really interesting history in welcoming people from all over the world. And what's very important for us at Gladstone Primary School is that the children really feel that they belong to that heritage of Peterborough. We're very much about making a difference for the children. We're very, very in whatever the children are engaging in, we're very mindful of their English language acquisition, so whether that's inside or outside. We're a primary school for children 4 to 11. I'm really pleased to say we've got preschool on site, and now we've got a baby clinic. So the health visitors already engage with the parents to say about hold on to your home language, hold on to your mother tongue, don't let go. We are happier that the children come to school very confident in their first language. The English will come because we know how to do that. Listening to the children's voice is really, really important to us, and we want our children to be happy, vibrant, and eager learners. This is a particularly favourite image of mine, where the children were involved in an arts community project, and I just thought, their vibrancy is really communicated in this image. What's very important to us is, though, to listen to the voice of the child and what their perceptions are. So when I asked Year 6 what slide they would like me to show, they chose this. And I thought, oh, right, they like order, they like boundaries, they like frameworks, and they like structure. And I have to admit that sometimes. So there we go. Yes, they can walk in a line too. So I really wanted to share that with you. But children's talk is really, really important to us. And whatever language they come with, we find different ways, different strategies to build that confidence. I'll just tell you very quickly, this year, Year 6, taking their SATs, it was the first time I had to actually walk around the school and ask classes to be quiet. Because they were just learning and making a lot of noise, and our, poor Year 6 is going through that. But I saw that as a really good sign, and a sign of how much we do value talk. And as I say, children being confident to talk in their first language. I meet with a group of Year 6 girls. They're very keen to develop talk in each other's languages, finding out more about how to talk to each other in each other's languages and to share that, which is very, very exciting. So I want to also share that it's very, very important that we teach children basic skills to enable them to be creative and innovative and to inspire each other. That's very important for us. And also the learning together is highly valued, and including the adult in that as well. And then when children have a real a confidence in basic skills, it then allows them to be more creative with those skills. So linking that with ICT is really important, and for children to be able to access in English and in other languages as well. And just lots of opportunities for children to be able to express themselves. And here, the power of friendships are very important. Do not assume that these two girls speak the same first language. The power of real-life experiences, ensuring that learning is contextualized and has meaning for the learner, is really important. And these models of how we support children to acquire English can also be applied to learning other languages. It's important to take the children out of their locality, out of their comfort zone. And so here we are visiting the Garden of Surprises at Burley House. There we are, sense of belonging, very important for us. And this is now the site of our new school. We're an expanding school. I'm sure you're aware that Peterborough is a growing population. So we're going to have our own Key Stage 2 department built on this site, but sharing the site with the community centre, which you can see there. I want to mention very quickly about educators working with the world of business. The process that we've been through in terms of the new build has been absolutely wonderful, so that we've worked with architects, we've worked with the construction and design team. They've listened to the children's voice. So in our new building, we will emphasize the global dimension in education, the power of multilingualism, social justice, and the child's voice. I'm going to move on very quickly because I can see that there we go. I want to just tell you about Rahan and Carolis very quickly, because we like to emphasize the children's learning stories. So Rahan and Carolis, aged 4, were constructing their rockets. And this is just a little bit of their dialogue. Rahan could hear a child nearby speaking in another language, and he comments, "Another language? It's not English." And the adult says, "What's the other language you can speak?" And so Carolis says, "I can do that other language. A, B, C. Rahan, a monster language. And what's important for us as educators is that we encourage children to talk about language, that we listen to their theory of language and linguistics. Yes, it could be different to our own, but it's a lot more interesting. And here we've got Carolis's notion that the English alphabet is actually a language in its own entirety, in its own right. I am coming to my conclusion. There we go. I had lots more to say, but I recognise that time is passing. So, returning to Mohamed Labib, for me, he does encapsulate what language learning is about. I love my life because I can see new things in my life. And that's what being multilingual is all about. And language learning has a significant part to play in perceiving new things in our lives. And not to acknowledge the power of multilingualism puts us at risk. Multilingualism needs to be acknowledged, needs to be embraced and celebrated. And we know the world will be a better place when that happens. And I think it's so important that we create a positive dialogue between business and the world of education, because that's how we're going to move forward, about understanding each other, because we do have a common cause and common drive, and it's about coming together and finding those commonalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much indeed for all four statements. I mean, absolutely brilliant. Again, I'm just going to ask the organisers, Emily and Ian, whether we can continue till 3 o'clock with some questions, because I think it would be great to have a few questions. Where is anybody who can pronounce on that? Would you be happy if we did that? Okay. Fine. 5 minutes. Stop talking, Emily. Now we'll start now. No, 5 minutes is okay, yeah? Okay. Right. No time really for me to ask any questions, but I'd love to have, let's say, 2 or 3 from you, if that's okay. So any questions? Thank you. And have you got a mic? Take one, please. And if you could be quick as well, and we're getting as many answers, but there's 2 up there, and there's 1 down here.
Thank you very much. My name is Jeff Scaplehorn, who's already been mentioned. Thanks to Bessie.
Could you speak up a tiny bit? Thank
Sorry,
you.
Yes.
It's fine. It's
My name is Jeff Scaplehorn, mentioned already in dispatches, I'm pleased to say. Thank you very much. I'm officially an independent languages consultant because I'm not allowed to represent my views with some of the organisations I belong to. But I want to come back to Bernadette's point about interesting language curriculum. And obviously she knows what I'm going to say, because for the last 14 years we have been offering national vocational qualification language units in mainly, it started off in further education, and then it became very much with colleagues such as Juliet here today as well, who's developed it much more in schools. We have trained assessors, we have trained verifiers, and we have a whole team of external verifiers which ensures the quality assurance process. These are based upon the national language standards, which were developed finally in the 2010. They are based upon the European Council framework and are resulting in what I would call learning outcomes. What has not been mentioned today is, in fact, the whole of the rest of Europe is going into developing qualifications in learning outcomes. And they've been, dare I say, pushed into screaming and whatever to do this to some extent. Also not being mentioned is the European Qualification Framework, which is being developed, and in 2010 the 4 countries of the United Kingdom presented a joint version of that, so that our qualification credit framework is matched against the European one, which means, and I'll shut up in a minute, which means that the level 2 French can be equated or referenced to a level 3 in the European framework. Therefore, it is a passport around Europe for not only our students, but also for our employees, if you like, and employers. And this is something we have got. Because of the performance points issue, I won't bore you with now, but we are losing centres because the head teachers want to divert over to GCSE, but in fact the disaffected language learners being attracted back to learning languages are disappearing because they can't cope with GCSE. It's not relevant to them, whereas every candidate, every member of staff, every teacher, every head teacher even I've spoken to in my centres and beyond have always praised the relevance of NVQ language units because it is preparing them much more appropriately for employment, because we do actually assessments which are based upon future employment. But I'll stop there, obviously.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't think that required an answer. I think that was just a very
It was a statement, yeah.
a very important statement. Thank you very much indeed. And there was a question, I think, down here at the front. There's a question.
Teresa Tinsley. I've done some research for the British Academy and now for the British Council on which languages are in demand. And I just wanted to pick up on your point, Bessie. You said the languages offered are not those in demand. And I would like to qualify that and say that the languages offered are not those perceived to be in demand, because French and German are the languages which are most in demand at the moment by any measure. But there are new languages coming in as well, which are also in demand. So the fact that we've got new languages coming in, an expanding need for a wider range of languages, doesn't reduce the need for those existing languages that we're already teaching.
No, a quick answer. I think I'm so
I
sorry.
just
We
wanted
have
to say
wrap it up.
that at least in accordance to what is presented with the from the Eurobarometer, throughout Europe, I didn't mention just England, and if you would ask, yes, in my country and many other countries, it would be French and German. However, when you go deeper into the public opinion and to students, they have a different answer. I think that the way that this has been researched is a bit of a problem, which we will be seeing in the future.
Genuinely very sorry that we have to wrap it up so quickly. It seems to have gone incredibly fast. We haven't been able to have a nice fiery debate. Ooh. But thank you to all of you very much indeed, to Bernadette Holmes, to Karine Chautelat, and to Christine Parker, and to Bessie Dendrinos as well. Thank you so much. Do stay around. There may be a little bit of a spat, we're hoping, later, but you never know. You never know. Thank you very much indeed.